Hey, Matt.
So we talked about one of your favorite shows last week with 30 Rock.
Yes, sir.
And I said, let's talk about one of my, not even one of, my favorite shows.
This is your number one.
This is my number one. A close second is Daria, the animated series,
Okay.
which never had a holiday special.
I was going to say, is there one to squeeze in there?
No, the only holiday special they did was Depth Takes a Holiday, and in it, it's considered the worst episode of Daria. Ooh. I'm a big fan of it. I get why people hate it though, because
Get right out of town. Like that's prime you and I. Everyone hates it. I love it.
I wouldn't say I love it, but I get why people dislike it, because Daria for a cartoon was very tied to reality.
Yeah.
And this is a very fantastical episode.
Okay.
Where her and Jane get stopped by a leprechaun and Cupid, and they're like, hey, we're from Holiday Land, and a bunch of the top most popular holidays have escaped to form a techno band with Jane's brother, and it's Christmas, Halloween, and Guy Fawkes Day, and they have to convince them to go back to Holiday Land or those holidays will never happen again.
Okay, so we're going to put a pause on what we were going to talk about today. I'm going to watch that episode, and then we're going to discuss that. I'm just kidding, but that is definitely something that we'll have to talk about. I think that's going to be like a future, like maybe a St. Patrick's Day episode or something.
Yeah, we'll find something for it.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so I picked Scrubs Season 1, Episode 11, My Own Personal Jesus. Now, Scrubs has had a decent amount of Christmas episodes. This is the one that's always stuck out of me, obviously because it's the first one. And I've said this before, but I think that Scrubs has one of the most impressive first seasons. We talked about this a little bit with 30 Rock as well, but like Scrubs just comes right out the gate knowing exactly what it is as a show. And it sticks pretty true to that the whole time, which is that we are a hospital drama with really funny moments and a lot of fantasy cutaways. And it never is not that show.
So I'm admitting something to you right now.
You don't like Scrubs, do you?
No.
Okay.
I do like Scrubs. I've only ever seen the first season of Scrubs.
Okay.
So I attempted to watch Scrubs a couple years ago, got through the first season. You're going to see a pattern with me, ladies and gentlemen, where it's not an active stop watching. Something else catches my interest and I start doing that.
Drift off, yeah.
Recently this year, I had tonsillectomy, and basically what I did during the first week of recovery is I rewatched the first season of Scrubs, and I still have not moved on to that second season. So no, I do not dislike Scrubs. There are elements of Scrubs that irk me a little bit, and it's more of those fantastical elements, like the cutaways, where I'm like, all right, guys. Like there's one very specific moment at the end of this episode, the cutaway to the
nativity,
nativity, where I'm like, was that like there was a really heartfelt moment, and then we cut to this nativity, and I'm like, ugh.
So here's the thing about Scrubs that I really learned to love, and there's also a great podcast now where Zach Braff and Donald Faison are rewatching every episode of Scrubs and discussing it. So let's travel back in time.
Yeah.
The podcast that I produced, my favorite episode of, was actually literally created so I could talk about my favorite episode of Scrubs.
Okay.
Which is episode 4 of season 1, called My Old Lady.
Okay.
And it's this very powerful episode where JD is explaining that in the hospital, 1 out of every 3 patients is going to die. Mm-hmm. And then they follow JD, Elliot, and Turk and their specific patients.
Yeah.
And the whole time you're trying to figure out which one of these patients is going to die. And then the big twist is at the end, all 3 patients die. Yeah. And it's about all of them dealing with their first patient that they couldn't help.
Yeah.
And it's a very emotional episode.
Is this the episode, you got to jog my memory, is this the episode where JD is taking care of the lady who's very comfortable with the fact that she is about to pass?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like it's a very heavy episode. So how did I watch Scrubs was I was getting ready to graduate high school. I had no college plans yet. I was a senior in high school. I still hadn't been accepted to a college. I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. It was very scary. And I went to the movies, as I did every Friday with a group of friends, and we would do like double and triple features. And I remember that specific day we saw Napoleon Dynamite, and then we saw Garden State. Okay. And I remember watching Garden State, and immediately it became my favorite movie of all time. And it's still like in my top 3. Like it is top 3 favorite films I've ever seen. And that movie, like I saw myself in Zach Braff's character.
Okay.
This dude who has a ton of passion but doesn't know what to do with it and feels just emotionally numb to the world around him.
Yeah.
So like we've talked about before, like when people make things their personality, like Garden State was my personality.
Yeah.
Like I was like, this is my movie. And I was talking to someone about how much I liked it. And they were like, you remind me of Zach Braff. Have you watched Scrubs?
Yeah.
I was like, no. So I went on Netflix and I ordered the first disc in the mail of the first season.
Yeah.
And I watched it and I immediately sealed it up, put it in the mailbox, and then drove to Suncoast Pictures to buy all of the seasons that were available. Because I was like, this show is speaking to me in a way that like no other show. Like I had liked shows, but this was like the first time I'm like, no, this show was written for me.
Yeah, I brought up the first episode of Scrubs, I think when we were talking about Community. That first episode, what's amazing about that pilot is you could pull all these characters out of the hospital and put them in any
job,
and that's how you feel. That was how I felt my first day of teaching. Things were going wrong. I'm like, I'm going to back away. I'm going to let someone else handle this.
Yeah.
Like that's just being in a new setting.
Yeah. And so the show, like I was like, this show is just, there was a point where I was writing screenplays and like trying to make it as a writer for a really long time. And anytime that I had writer's block, I would put on Scrubs.
Yeah.
And it was always just the show that like got me thinking and getting creative. So I do agree that sometimes, like now that I watch it, sometimes the fantasy cutaways are like a little stressful.
Yeah.
But the thing that I do love about this show is that it has been voted multiple times over as the most medically accurate show on television.
Really?
And the reason is because there is a John Dorian. John Dorian is an actual person. He's the friend of Bill Lawrence. So they have a writer's room that is half comedy writers, half actual doctors.
Oh, I like
and
that.
the actual doctors are there to be like, we would never do that.
Yeah.
and try to make sure that everything is like on the level. But they every season would interview a bunch of doctors about stories and things that happened to them that year at the hospital, and then pull those stories for how they would write the next season storylines. So it's just got a lot of like realness in it, and the fact that like every other hospital drama I've ever seen, you either have the miracle doctor that no one ever dies because they're just so good at their job, or the only people that die are the people that have the most dramatic story to die. So like this one was just like, it just treated hospital life as like, you've got a dark sense of humor because you deal with the fact that there's a 50-50 shot that you're going to kill somebody every single day.
Yeah.
And the only way to deal with that is to have a really sick sense of humor about it.
Yeah.
And to drift off into like fantastical elements and try to like see things. Now, I agree with you. The nativity scene really kind of ruins that moment.
Yeah, because it is a heartfelt moment. And I know we're jumping to the end there, but it is, and the show has a lot of those heartfelt
It has those heartfelt, and I think that this specific episode is one of the most well-crafted, like, questioning one's faith things I've ever seen on television.
Yeah.
And it totally makes sense. It totally makes sense that someone's first Christmas working at a hospital, just seeing terrible things day in and day out, would just crush your Christmas spirit.
And seeing him go from super excited to share this faith with the people around him, one night later to
just be like,
just
no,
being a completely different person.
Yeah. And I've had friends like that.
Yeah.
Where it's like they just have this one moment or this one thing that changes their life.
Yeah.
And it's like they're never exactly the same person ever again because of it. And that's what I liked about Scrubs was it was this brilliant sitcom that tackled so many different things. But I also think that the writing is smart in the way that it keeps bringing up things.
Yeah.
So like the example that I have is early on, Dr. Kelso, who's kind of your pseudo villain. Although if you watch beyond the first season, he has a very nice, slow build redemption story throughout his.
All right, so to me, he's a villain.
Yeah,
because I haven't gotten past.
You get to see a lot more of like the weight of everything that's tied to the hospital and how it makes him the person that he is.
I think that's hinted at in season 1. I don't think there is no character in the show that is a bad human being.
Exactly. But he's definitely the toughest to swallow.
Yes.
But he tells Dr. Elliot that She's going to see a baby, and her first thoughts are going to be, ooh, look, a baby.
Yeah.
And that comes up like 3 times in the episode.
Yeah.
Like JD sees a baby and goes, ooh, look, a baby. And it's part of their show is very good at those callbacks and like putting like a single line of dialogue that builds back into it.
Again, having not seen past the first season, literally it opens up with JD trying to trick this new nurse into kissing him under the mistletoe.
Yeah.
He sees her every day at
Not great.
9:15 a.m. That's not what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is the constant struggle, the power struggle between JD and our janitor. Is that explored as we get further into the series?
So fun fact, they thought that the show would not get renewed.
Yeah.
And Bill Lawrence thought that there needed to be some big crazy twist if they were only going to be a 1-season show. Yeah. And his plan for the big twist was that the janitor doesn't exist at all. It's JD's subconscious constantly getting in his own way.
Oh my God.
But then like as they kept getting renewed for like, I think it was like around, they said halfway around the second season, the actor who played the janitor was like, can I like talk to other people?
Yeah.
So like, then they were just like, all right, let's just drop that and let him just be like this weird guy in the hospital.
And I love the janitor. So the janitor is played by the dad from The Middle, which I absolutely love.
So he's an improv comic.
Yeah.
And they talk about this on the commentary tracks. They talk about this on the podcast. There was never a single line of dialogue written for him.
Really?
Like it would just literally say, Neil will figure it out. In the script,
awesome.
And they would just let him,
and he did, and he always
did. He would just riff out dialogue. He would just, so he built that character from scratch on his own.
Yeah, I love the episode where he's constantly missing something and constantly accuses JD of stealing it.
Let me see if there's a line that they talk about on the podcast, and it's been like popping into my mind a whole bunch now, where he riffed out this long speech in like, I think it was like season 6 or something. The episode is he's giving the lawyer, Ted, advice on how to date a girl and how to show her that he loves them.
Okay.
And he tells this insane story.
Ted, you want to get this girl? Give her a present. Better yet, a present that you made. My first date with Lady, I made her a duck I killed. Now, you're thinking, wouldn't it have been more romantic to kill it in front of her? And yes, it would have, and that was my plan. But in the car, on the way over, we kind of got into it. You know, maybe I was in a bad mood, maybe he was, I don't know. But one thing led to another, and then we're off on the side of the road, shirtless, and seeing what's what. Next thing I knew...
I'm really not comfortable murdering for her.
So, is it cliche to say that John C. McGinley is my favorite part of the series?
No, because he's pretty fantastic in this show.
I mean, absolutely amazing. I love the way that character, again, only seen the first season. I love the way that character is written as always giving our main focus characters a hard time. But you know deep down that he actually gives a shit.
Dr. Cox, the relationship between Dr. Cox and JD is incredible. So you're kind of in the dark about everything with Scrubs.
Pretty much anything that happens after season 1.
Oh my God. I really want you to watch up to at least like the end of season 3, because there is what is like one of the greatest TV show twists of all time that involves Dr. Cox. That is like
yeah, and my worst part with watching Scrubs is, we talked about this a couple episodes ago, is the streaming service that Scrubs is on is Hulu.
Yeah. Well, and so here's the other thing, and they talk about this on the commentary track on the podcast all the time, is that all of the song copyrights have fallen through now.
Yeah.
So if you're not watching it on DVD, you're not getting the original songs that they put for the ending scenes.
Shit.
Because it's like Counting Crows, like it's like they got like these big songs, and they're powerful songs. Like Say Anything does one of the closing songs in an episode, but like now it's just like generic music.
All right,
so
I'm
it's
looking up how much these DVDs
they're worth it, dude. It's worth every dollar. But I do, one of the first like quotes that I wrote down when they're talking about Turk's faith, and he's like, you know, I love that he's so faithful, but I also like to pick on him a little bit. And he's like, no, it's fine. You've got your God, and I've got this little Monopoly piece that I keep. And he goes, did you just compare my Lord and Savior to a top hat? And his girlfriend is sitting and she goes, yeah, he did, baby. Go get him. Like, the relationship between the two of them is so funny. But then the other thing that I wrote down is, this is one of the, there's a couple shows that are like my brother and I's, like, we just watched it together. It became part of our like brotherly vernacular. We talk about JD during the fantasy sequence where Turk is like a church minister and he gets up and is doing like the dance. We're like, JD's dance where he's just like beating his heart with his little hat and like shaking all over is so fucking good. Like, because it's just a parody of like the Blues Brothers sequence,
yes,
but it's so good. The other line that I always think of with this particular episode is there's a second plot line. All of the plot lines don't necessarily tie around to Christmas, but they all tie around to babies.
Yeah.
And with JD's storyline, it's that Dr. Cox has asked him to film the birth of his friend's baby. And JD doesn't get a new VHS tape because he just assumes that whatever tape is in there is safe to tape over.
Now, to be fair, I mean, I can't
That's on
blame
Dr.
the
Cox.
guy. That's 100% on Dr.
Yeah.
Cox for not changing the tape.
But there is that line where they tape a different birth.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, that's so weird. Like, he has a full head of hair
he
there.
didn't have hair 2 seconds ago.
And
Like,
JD
we
just
shaved
goes,
it.
we shaved the baby.
I think Dr. Cox goes, standard procedure.
Standard procedure. You know, with that outbreak of prenatal lice that's been going around. And his wife,
Oh
his
my
ex-wife-
God, his ex-wife. So at this point, JD and
prenatal
her
lice. That would be lice inside the
womb.
vagina. Like,
So, like, I mean, at this point, JD's already slept with his ex-wife a couple episodes ago. I love the fact that JD, when he's talking to Dr. Cox, and then just turns and be like, and he didn't go see baby Charlie. And she flips out on him for snitching.
well, and she says, "You're aware? Is your mother aware she eventually has to stop the breastfeeding?"
I love when Dr. Cox gets behind her and starts giving her a shoulder massage. And he's like, that's right, baby. Now work the body. Work the body.
So it's so funny. They on the podcast they had Bill Lawrence on, and he was talking about like the dynamics of the show. And he goes, when I went into the show, this was my thought process. And obviously it changed over time. But he goes, the thought process that we always had was that Turk and Carla were always going to be that faithful couple that you knew were going to end up together no matter what.
Okay.
And he goes, JD and Elliot were always supposed to be just a fling that they moved on from.
Okay.
And Dr. Cox and his ex-wife were supposed to be the will they, won't they.
Okay.
And he goes, but as like the scripts kept getting written, it was like, well, there's so much more to mine if they get back together. And there's so much more to do if, like, as they kept writing it and as that friendship between JD and Elliot kept growing, it's like, oh, this is a really, truly good love story. Like, so it was kind of funny. Always like, you know, your intentions are always one way, but like, as you're building these characters and building this world over years and years and years, your intentions completely shift. But yeah, I love, it's funny watching the first season knowing that, because you're like, oh, I can see how they're really playing this like will they, won't they dynamic with Dr. Cox and his ex. But then like now it's like, oh, well, no, they're clearly going to get back together. They are like way too perfect together.
100%. I mean, you could see it in that episode. Oh my gosh, the work, the body. Body blow. Like, oh my God.
Oh
so
God.
good.
Something that I liked about this episode, and it's something I like in a lot of shows, and sitcoms don't often do this, but it's all of the pieces coming together in that final scene. That's I'll call it the Sinner Man scene.
Yeah.
Where Turk has lost his faith.
Yeah.
Earlier in the episode, he makes them look out the window at the tree in Miller Park. The girl who's pregnant mentions that she was just hanging out at the tree by Miller
Elliot's
Park.
lost a pregnant girl. Basically.
Yeah. Elliot scared a pregnant woman away.
Yeah.
But then because Turk loses his faith, Carla brings him up on the roof of the hospital and says, sometimes you need to just come up here to clear your head. And because he's on the roof of the hospital, he's looking at the tree in Miller Park, and all of a sudden he knows, he doesn't know how he knows, but he just knows where this missing pregnant woman is.
Yeah.
And he goes and finds her.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's just all of that storytelling, all those like little pieces that feel like they're not important at the time falling together. Scrubs has so many episodes like that where it's just like, oh, these like little throwaway lines actually mean something much bigger when we get to the final scene. And it's a very sweet moment. The voiceovers, I think that the voiceovers in this show are some of my all-time favorites because they
Yeah.
really like whoever it was in the writer's room who was writing these like life lessons, like, well, what do we learn today? Type like,
Well, that was my
things.
problem with it is we got Zach Braff's voiceover
yeah.
and then it cuts to that nativity.
cuts to that
and I'm like,
nativity
we
scene.
didn't need that.
No, we didn't. Especially because I think that him making the "God bless us, everyone" comment and them all making fun of him is fine.
Yeah, that's enough.
Yeah, that's all you really need it. The only other note I have is banana hammock.
Yeah. I love that's his go-to when he's unsure of what the hell to say.
Just yells banana hammock. It's kind of a sadder scene, but it's the parody of 12 Days of Christmas of all of the different ways that people have died inside the hospital.
Yeah.
On the first day of Christmas, my true love gave to me a drunk who drove into a tree. On the second day of Christmas, my true love gave to me 2 shattered skulls and a drunk who drove into a tree. 12 beaten children, 11 drive-by shootings, 10 frozen homeless, 9 amputations, 8 burned victims, 7 strangled shoppers, 6 random knifing, 5 suicides, 4 beaten wives, 3 ODs, 2 shattered skulls, and a drunk who drove into a tree.
It's so well done because Turk's face just at this point where he is just broken.
Yeah.
I like the ballsiness of this show because I think about other shows. You know, we were talking about a little bit of How I Met Your Mother, and there is some definite How I Met Your Mother Christmas episodes that are worth us doing episodes on. But like,
that is a show I have never seen one.
you've never went.
episode
So How I Met Your Mother is not bad. It's
Okay.
It's the last good. I've said before, it's the last good show with a laugh track.
of. Okay, yeah.
But most of those storylines, you don't ever feel like the characters are having a major emotional change. But in Scrubs, it's like you can feel them getting hardened. And then it ends with a punk rock version of Deck the Halls, which is always fun.
Yes.
I thought that this episode ended with this Beatles version of... It's not actually a Beatles version of the song, but Ted, the actor who plays Ted, who unfortunately died this year, he has 2 bands in real... Or he had 2 bands in real life.
Okay.
And one of them appears in the show, his a cappella band called The Blanks. But he also had a Beatles cover band that only did Beatles versions of Christmas songs.
Okay.
And they used one of his versions of Joy to the World in one of the Christmas episodes.
Oh, I love it.
Where it's Joy to the World, but it sounds like it's like done in the style of like Love, Love Me Do.
Okay.
So it's got like that harmonica.
Yeah.
It's very
I
catchy.
will definitely have to check it out. So, taking away from that, this is a random question. How much money do you think was spent on these bits that are like
They
2
said it was a lot of
seconds
money.
long?
They
I mean,
said there
think
was
about-
a Star Wars one in the first season, and on the podcast they were like, that was a whole day. That was a whole day for that cutaway.
Well, think about the amount of makeup that McGinley had to put on to
Oh yeah,
do the
to
Grinch,
do the Grinch
portion.
thing. Yeah, but from what I understand, it was one of those things where it's like you either take the fantasy sequences or you don't get the show.
Yeah.
like he was like Bill Lawrence was like very dead set that it was
Really?
like this is the thing, and you have to think about like the thing that you have to give credit to is that this is. I don't want to say this was before Family Guy, but it was definitely before Family Guy was like Family Guy. Like this was when like Family Guy was like the failed show that was on Fox for a season.
Yeah.
So I feel like Scrubs really pushed the limit on like doing these cutaway fantasy things, which also How I Met Your Mother does. But like How I Met Your Mother was a lot more like cutting to flashbacks, where this is a lot more of like the craziness in his head. Now, I think that having known the last episode, I think that Bill Lawrence always knew what the final speech was going to be. And that's why he pushed so hard for the fantasies.
Okay.
And I think that if you didn't have every episode filled with him constantly drifting away into fantasies, like the power of him having a very realistic, genuine dream fantasy wouldn't hit as hard.
Yeah.
Like, because it's also that sign of like he grew up. He grew past imagining people as cartoon characters and movie characters and is now just thinking about the fantasy of what his future can possibly be. I cannot watch the last episode without crying. Like I've tried for like 10 years now, but Great show. Highly recommend Scrubs.
Yeah,
Sorry
eventually I will watch.
Sorry that
all
I
of
just
Scrubs.
spoiled the shit out of it for anybody listening.
Hey, it's all good.
Scrubs is a great show. This is like not a Christmas episode that I go to a lot, but I have a weird memory with it.
Yeah.
And my weird memory is, and it's funny because I don't remember this girl's name, but it was during college. I was on the online dating scene, and met this kind of cool girl. And we met for food. We met at the local diner for food. And we were like having a really good conversation. And she wanted to keep hanging out. I mentioned Scrubs was one of my favorite shows. She's like, oh, I always wanted to watch it. And it was right around Christmas time. She said, do they have a Christmas episode? And I said, they do. And I grabbed my season 1 DVD and went to her house. And we watched the season 1 episode of Scrubs.
Nice.
Yeah. And it was cool. We hung out for a couple of months after that. Never as like dating. It was just like, oh, this is a really cool friend. Then like just life happened.
Yeah.
But like, I still remember that girl. Like, I remember everything about, I can't remember her name, which is killing me. It's killing me that I can't remember her name. But like,
you spent months hanging out with this person.
But I could like visually tell you everything about this person.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, this is what she looked like. This was her personality type. Like, this was this, that, and the other thing. But it was like, we hung out for maybe like 6 months, which like 6 months, 15, 20 years ago is like, it might as well have never happened. Like, I just remember that specific moment as like one of those memories that I'm like, this was nice. This was like this is nice.
I love it. So the first season of Scrubs is on Amazon in acceptable condition for $1.56.
Go for it. But you've already seen that. So move on to season 2.
So just buy season 2.
Just see if someone's got the whole season. You just don't need the last, I think it's like season 8. You don't need. You need seasons 1 through 7.
So wait a minute. You just told me that to watch the last episode.
So
did Zach Braff leave the show at some point?
So what happened was they wanted to do one last season.
Yeah.
NBC didn't want them to do one last season. So ABC bought the show so they could do one last season. And ABC was like, we'll let you do the last season, but maybe we'll even do a spin-off series called like Scrubs Interns. And they're like, okay, cool. So they shot a whole spin-off series called Scrubs Interns. And then at the 0 hour, ABC released it as Scrubs Season 8, even though it didn't have any of the original cast on it. And that's why I'm like, I'm not watching that.
Oh, fuck.
Like, I was like, that doesn't count to me. Like, that you can't just be like, it's Scrubs. Like, Scrubs Interns, I would have given a shot. Scrubs Season 8 with almost none of the original cast? No.
So the last episode you're describing
Is
to me
the last episode of Season 7.
is the last episode of season 7.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which was like very clearly written. Like, so much so written as the final season that instead of like closing credits, it's just shots of all of the cast members and crew saying goodbye to each other. Wait, how many seasons? Maybe I got that wrong.
There's 9.
Okay, then season 8 is the last real season. Season 9 is the spinoff season.
So the most I know about later seasons of Scrubs comes from a line in Community, the last episode that Donald Glover's in, because or maybe it was like 2 episodes earlier. It had been announced that Donald Glover was leaving the show.
Yeah.
And one of the throwaway lines he says in Community is, it's like Zach Braff leaving Scrubs after everything that they've done for him.
So good. So good. God damn it. What a good show and what a great show.
Yeah, like oh my gosh. So we've done my favorite show of all time.
We've done my
your
favorite of all
show,
time. You've done your second favorite
my
show.
second favorite show.
We're doing pretty good. We're knocking out these TV shows.
We are knocking out these TV shows, and it's not going to be like this every week, but I love that we've reached a point where, you know what, the basis of conversation is going to begin around Christmas.
And it's going to go everywhere.
It's going to go everywhere.
But that being said, I know what's coming up next. The next week's episode is one that we recorded live for a live stream.
Oh,
and
my gosh.
it's very Christmas.
It's very Christmassy. So again, when we did it, we were in the heart. It
was
season.
2 weeks away.
Yeah, I'm so excited to
to
hear how it turned out, because honestly, it was one of the best, like most fun conversations.
Doing
I've had.
live stuff like that is so much fun.
Oh
to me.
yeah,
and
sure.
Joe's just like Joe's one of those people where it's like we could have Joe on every 5 episodes.
I know, I love Joe. I think we said he was coming back. I can't remember what we were discussing.
He was
next.
going to pick something else. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
When I edit it, I'll be like, oh, that's right. He's going to come on and talk about blank. But
Yeah.
maybe it was like one of the many RuPaul Christmas albums he introduced.
I'm
us
excited to bring NDOT back so we can talk about the remake of Emmett Otter when that finally drops.
when that drops, we'll definitely bring NDOT back and we'll have our thoughts. I don't know how soon that's coming, but
Yeah, I don't know.
yeah. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, Matt.
Oh, You're listening to the Geekscape Network. You're listening to the Geekscape Network.